In the vast steppes of Mongolia, where the wind carries whispers of ancient conquests and the earth holds secrets buried for nearly 8 centuries, lies one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. No golden mask marks its location. No towering pyramid rises from the landscape. No carved inscription reveals its presence. And yet, somewhere beneath the sacred mountains and rolling grasslands of the Mongol heartland, rests the body of a man who once ruled the largest contiguous empire the world has ever known. His name was Genghis Khan, and his tomb has never been found. Tonight, join bedtime history as we venture into the shadows of the 13th century, where legend and reality blur like morning mist over the Mongolian plains. This isn't just the story of a missing grave. This is the tale of a deliberate vanishing, a calculated erasure so complete that it has defied treasure hunters, archaeologists, and modern technology for 800 years. Because when the greatest conqueror in human history chose to disappear, he didn't just hide his body. He hid himself from time itself. Close your eyes and imagine this. The year is 1227. Across the known world, from the walls of Beijing to the shores of the Caspian Sea, messengers ride through the night carrying news that will shake empires to their foundations. The great Khan is dead. The man who united the Mongol tribes, who swept across Asia like a force of nature, who commanded armies that struck fear into the hearts of emperors and sultans alike, has breathed his last breath. But as the empire mourns and rival claimants sharpen their swords, something extraordinary happens. The body of Genghis Khan simply vanishes, not lost in battle, not stolen by enemies, not destroyed by time or the elements. Deliberately, methodically, and with a precision that would make his military campaigns seem simple by comparison, the mortal remains of the most powerful man on earth are erased from human knowledge. The secret history of the Mongols, written shortly after his death and considered the most authoritative account of his life, contains thousands of words about his conquests, his relationships, his rise from outcast to emperor. But when it comes to his death and burial, the text offers only 4 haunting words. He ascended to heaven. No location, no ceremony, no tomb. Just silence where history should speak loudest. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't the natural decay of memory over time. This was the execution of a plan so carefully orchestrated that it makes the construction of his empire look like child's play. Because Genghis Khan understood something that most conquerors never grasp. In death, mystery is more powerful than any monument. But why? Why would a man who carved his name across continents choose to vanish without a trace? The answer lies not in what he conquered, but in what he feared. Genghis Khan had seen what happened to the tombs of other great rulers. He had witnessed grave robbers desecrating burial sites. He had watched as enemies dug up the bones of fallen kings to scatter them to the winds as the ultimate insult. And he had learned that in death, even the mightiest emperor becomes vulnerable, so he chose a different path. Instead of a tomb that could be found, looted, and destroyed, he opted for invisibility. Instead of a monument that would crumble with time, he created a mystery that would grow stronger with each passing century. The man who had spent his life making himself impossible to defeat in battle made himself impossible to find in death. The legends that surround his burial read like something from the darkest fairy tale. According to Marco Polo, whose writings would later spread these stories across medieval Europe, 2,000 slaves attended the funeral ceremony. When it was complete, the soldiers guarding them killed every single slave to ensure their silence. Then, another group of soldiers killed those guards. And finally, that group killed themselves, taking the location of the tomb to their graves. Other stories tell of 1,000 horses trampling the burial site until no trace remained. Some claim rivers were diverted to flow over the grave, washing away all evidence beneath rushing water. Still others whisper of forests planted to conceal the location, of permafrost sealing the secret forever beneath layers of ice and earth. But perhaps the most intriguing legend involves a baby camel. According to this tale, recorded in ancient Chinese texts, a young camel was buried alongside the Khan. Its mother was then released, and only she could find her way back to mourn at the grave. 30 years later, when the Khan's descendants needed to locate the tomb, they followed the grieving mother camel as she returned to the burial site, weeping for her lost offspring. The image is both beautiful and haunting. A mother's love serving as the only compass to history's greatest treasure. Yet even this touching story may be nothing more than another layer of deception, because Genghis Khan was, above all else, a master of psychological warfare. And what better way to protect a secret than to surround it with so many false stories that the truth becomes impossible to separate from fiction? The most widely accepted theory among historians places his final resting place near Burkhan Khaldun, a sacred mountain in Mongolia's Khentai province. This crescent-shaped peak, rising 2,362 meters above the surrounding landscape, held profound spiritual significance for the young Temujin, who would become Genghis Khan. Its name literally means God Mountain, and it was here that he found refuge during the darkest period of his youth, when enemies hunted him like a wild animal across the steppes. According to the secret history of the Mongols, it was beneath a tree on this mountain that the future conqueror once rested after a hunting expedition. Gazing out over the sweeping vista of forests and grasslands, he reportedly declared, "What a beautiful view. Bury me here when I die." Whether these words were actually spoken or added later by chroniclers seeking to give meaning to mystery, they point to the deep connection between the man and this place. Burkhan Khaldun was more than just a mountain to Genghis Khan. It was his sanctuary, his place of prayer to the sky god Tengri, his hunting ground where he learned the skills that would make him master of the world. If any location could claim to be his chosen resting place, it would be this sacred peak where earth meets heaven in the Mongol worldview. Immediately after his death and burial, a great taboo was declared over a 240 square kilometer area surrounding Burkhan Khaldun. Known in Mongolian as Ikh Khorig, this forbidden zone carried a death sentence for any unauthorized person who dared to enter. Only members of Genghis Khan's family were permitted access, and only when they needed to bury another relative. The enforcement of this taboo fell to the Darkhad, a guardian tribe who were exempted from taxes and military service in exchange for their eternal vigilance. For nearly 7 centuries, the descendants of the Darkhad maintained this sacred trust, passing down from generation to generation the responsibility of protecting whatever secrets lay hidden within the forbidden zone. Even when the Mongolian People's Republic was established in 1924, officially ending the taboo, the area remained largely untouched. Today, it exists as the Khan Khentai strictly protected area, covering 12,000 square kilometers and recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. But protection and secrecy are not the same thing. The fact that an area is forbidden doesn't necessarily mean it contains what people think it does. And this is where the mystery deepens, where the line between historical fact and deliberate misdirection becomes impossibly blurred. Because in the centuries that followed Genghis Khan's death, something extraordinary happened. The mystery didn't fade, it grew stronger. And with each failed expedition, each fruitless search, each technological advance that still couldn't crack the code, the legend transformed from historical puzzle into something approaching the supernatural. The first serious attempts to locate the tomb began in the modern era, when treasure hunters and archaeologists armed with shovels and determination ventured into the Mongolian wilderness. What they discovered was that the steppes guard their secrets jealously. The landscape itself seemed to conspire against them. Equipment would malfunction for no apparent reason. Team members would fall ill with mysterious ailments. Weather would turn violent without warning, as if the very elements were protecting something ancient and sacred. In 2001, a joint American-Mongolian expedition led by retired Chicago commodity trader Maury Kravitz seemed to break through these barriers. After years of research and planning, they identified a promising site near the town of Batshurit, 200 miles northeast of Ulaanbaatar. The location had everything historians expected: proximity to Genghis Khan's presumed birthplace, closeness to the Onan River, where he had declared himself universal ruler of the Mongols, and most intriguingly, a walled burial ground containing at least 20 unopened tombs, clearly meant for high-status individuals. The excitement was palpable. Here, finally, was tangible evidence. Stone walls, burial chambers, a location that matched historical descriptions. Kravitz and his team prepared for what they believed would be the archaeological discovery of the century. But then something changed. The expedition, which had run smoothly for years, suddenly encountered a series of incidents that defied rational explanation. Team members began falling ill. Venomous snakes appeared where none should have been. Equipment that had worked perfectly for months started failing. Vehicles rolled down hillsides despite being properly secured. What had begun as a scientific expedition started feeling like something from a ghost story. Local guides whispered about the curse of the Great Khan, about supernatural forces protecting the tomb from those who would disturb its eternal rest. The expedition was forced to halt. After 4 decades of searching, Kravitz and his team left Mongolia with more questions than answers. They had found ancient tombs, but none that could be definitively linked to Genghis Khan. They had discovered burial practices that matched historical descriptions, but no conclusive proof. Most unsettling of all, they had experienced firsthand the strange reluctance of the Mongolian landscape to give up its secrets. But science doesn't give up easily. If traditional archaeological methods were failing, perhaps technology could succeed where shovels and determination had not. Enter Dr. Albert Yu-Min Lin, a research scientist who decided to revolutionize the search using the power of the internet and artificial intelligence. In 2010, Lin launched an unprecedented crowdsourcing project. He recruited over 10,000 volunteers from around the world to scan satellite images of Mongolia, looking for geographical anomalies that might indicate burial sites. These citizen scientists examined over 6,000 square kilometers of terrain from their computer screens, tagging anything that looked unusual or potentially archaeological. The data they collected was fed into sophisticated AI systems that analyzed patterns, cross-referenced locations, and produced a ranked list of the most promising sites. The result was staggering: 55 potential locations that exhibited characteristics consistent with major burial sites. For the first time in history, the search for Genghis Khan's tomb had truly global participation and cutting-edge technology behind it. Yet, when archaeological teams investigated these locations, they found the same thing their predecessors had discovered for 8 centuries: nothing. No tomb, no treasure. No definitive evidence that the Great Khan had ever rested there. It was as if the very act of looking for him caused him to vanish more completely. The failure of Lin's project represented more than just another unsuccessful expedition. It suggested that the mystery of Genghis Khan's tomb might be fundamentally unsolvable using conventional methods. Perhaps the secret wasn't hidden by ancient burial practices or natural concealment. Perhaps it was protected by something far more sophisticated, a deliberate campaign of misdirection that had been centuries in the making. This possibility became even more intriguing when French archaeologist Pierre-Henri and imaging specialist Raphael Hautefort conducted unauthorized drone surveys of Burkhan Khaldun in 2015 and 2016. Using advanced aerial photography and scientific imaging techniques, they identified what appeared to be a 250-meter-long artificial tumulus at the mountain's summit. The structure showed clear signs of human construction and resembled the imperial tombs of ancient China. Here, finally, was physical evidence that something significant lay buried on the sacred mountain. But the discovery raised as many questions as it answered. The expedition had been conducted without proper authorization from Mongolian authorities, making follow-up excavation impossible. The tumulus could contain anything from Genghis Khan himself to another member of his family, Or it could be an entirely different burial from a different era. More troubling still, the very existence of such a structure contradicted the historical accounts that described a secret burial with no visible markers. If Genghis Khan's tomb was marked by a massive earthen mound on the summit of Mongolia's most sacred mountain, how had it remained hidden for so long? Was this the real tomb, or was it another layer in a deception that had fooled even modern technology? The answer might lie not in what archaeologists have found, but in what they haven't been allowed to find. Because the greatest obstacle to solving this mystery isn't technological or geographical, it's cultural. The Mongolian people themselves, the descendants of those who once served the great Khan, have no desire to see their founder's rest disturbed. To understand why, you must understand what Genghis Khan represents to modern Mongolia. He isn't simply a historical figure or a long-dead emperor. He is the embodiment of Mongolian identity, the spiritual father of the nation, a presence that transcends death itself. Many Mongolians view him with an almost religious reverence, believing that his spirit continues to watch over his people from wherever he rests. Professor Jack Weatherford, an American anthropologist who has spent years studying Mongolian culture, explains it simply: Mongolians are fairly unanimous in not wanting their founder to be disturbed. The idea that anyone would search for the tomb is disturbing for most Mongols, and the idea of foreigners searching for it can be quite alarming. This cultural resistance has created a unique situation in archaeology. Unlike other great tombs that have been discovered and excavated with the support, or at least the tolerance of local populations, Genghis Khan's burial site is actively protected by the very people who might know its location. The Mongolian government maintains strict controls over archaeological activity in the region around Burkhan Khaldun, and even scientific research requires extensive permits and oversight. But perhaps this protection is exactly what Genghis Khan intended. Perhaps the greatest conqueror in history understood that the most effective way to ensure his tomb would never be found was to make sure his own people would guard the secret forever. This raises a profound question that cuts to the heart of the mystery. Was the disappearance of Genghis Khan's tomb an accident of history, or was it the most successful long-term strategy ever devised? Because when you examine the evidence, a disturbing pattern emerges. Every attempt to find the tomb has failed, not just because of technical difficulties or bad luck, but because the very culture that produced Genghis Khan has evolved to protect his absence. Think about it this way. Most ancient rulers built monuments to ensure they would be remembered. Pyramids, mausoleums, elaborate burial complexes designed to showcase their power for eternity. But what if Genghis Khan understood something these other rulers didn't? What if he realized that the most powerful tomb is the one that can never be found? Consider the psychological impact. The pharaohs of Egypt rest in chambers we can visit and photograph. Their mummies lie in glass cases, reduced to curiosities for tourists. Alexander the Great's supposed tomb has been dug up and disputed so many times that no one even knows which bones might have belonged to him. But Genghis Khan? He remains untouchable, unknowable, still mysterious after 8 centuries. This isn't just about physical protection, it's about preserving mystique. And mystique, as any conqueror knows, is a form of power that transcends death itself. But the mystery deepens when you realize that the absence of his tomb may have been orchestrated on multiple levels. Because while the world has spent centuries looking for Genghis Khan's body, very few people have asked a more fundamental question: are we even looking for the right thing? The historical sources that mention his death are remarkably vague about one crucial detail. They tell us when he died, August 1227, during the siege of the Western Shah Kingdom, but they're strangely silent about how he died. And that silence may be more significant than anyone has realized. The official cause of death, according to most sources, was illness, a fever that struck him down in the prime of his military campaign, but whispers of other possibilities have persisted for centuries. Some accounts suggest he was wounded by an arrow during battle. Others claim he fell from his horse while hunting. Marco Polo, whose reliability historians have long questioned, wrote that an arrow to the knee proved fatal. More exotic theories abound. One early European account claimed he was struck by lightning, as if the heavens themselves had called him home. Another story tells of a magical spell cast by the vengeful king of the Western Xia, a last desperate act of supernatural warfare against the Mongol invader. The most scandalous version, whispered in the shadows of medieval courts, involves a captured Tangut queen who concealed a deadly device within her person, using her own body as a weapon to destroy the man who had destroyed her kingdom. According to this account, Genghis Khan died not in glorious battle but in private agony, his conquest turning into his destruction. But here's what's truly unsettling about these conflicting stories. They might all be deliberate lies, because if you wanted to hide not just where someone was buried, but ensure that no one could ever verify their death in the first place, what better way than to surround the entire event with so many contradictory accounts that the truth becomes impossible to determine? This strategy would be perfectly consistent with Mongol military tactics. Genghis Khan was famous for psychological warfare, for spreading conflicting information about his movements and intentions to confuse his enemies. Why wouldn't he apply the same principles to his own death? Why not create a fog of uncertainty so thick that even the basic facts become unknowable? If this theory is correct, then everyone who has ever searched for his tomb has been operating under a fundamental misconception. They've been looking for the burial site of a man whose death itself might be a carefully constructed fiction. But this raises an even more disturbing possibility. What if Genghis Khan didn't die in 1227 at all? What if the entire story of his death was a strategic deception designed to allow him to disappear from history while his enemies believed him defeated? The idea sounds impossible at first, but consider the context. In 1227, the Mongol Empire was facing challenges on multiple fronts. The Western Xia campaign was proving more difficult than expected. Chinese resistance was stiffening. European kingdoms were beginning to organize defenses against the Mongol threat. For a ruler whose power depended on an aura of invincibility, any sign of weakness could have been catastrophic. What if the illness that supposedly killed him was actually an opportunity? A chance to stage his own death, transfer power to his chosen successor, and vanish into the vastness of the Mongolian steppes. The man who had spent decades deceiving his enemies might have pulled off the ultimate deception, convincing the world he was dead, while continuing to live in secret. This theory would explain many of the mysteries surrounding his burial. There would be no tomb because there would be no body. The elaborate secrecy wouldn't be about hiding a gravesite, it would be about maintaining the fiction that there was a gravesite to hide. The loyal guardians wouldn't be protecting a burial ground, they would be protecting an empty space that served as a decoy for the real secret. It would also explain why the Mongol Empire continued to function so effectively after his supposed death, why his military strategies remained consistent, why his political vision remained coherent, because perhaps the mind behind those strategies and that vision never actually left. The secret history of the Mongols, with its cryptic phrase that he ascended to heaven, takes on new meaning under this interpretation. Not death, but disappearance. Not burial, but transformation into something beyond the reach of ordinary men. Of course, this is speculation. But it's the kind of speculation that the mystery of Genghis Khan invites. Because when the evidence is so carefully obscured, when the contradictions are so numerous, when the silence is so complete, the mind naturally begins to explore possibilities that seem impossible under normal circumstances. And perhaps that's exactly what was intended. Perhaps the greatest achievement of Genghis Khan wasn't conquering half the known world. Perhaps it was creating a mystery so perfect, so complete, that 8 centuries later, we're still trying to solve it. But there's another layer to this puzzle that most people never consider. The economic implications of the missing tomb are staggering beyond imagination. Because when Genghis Khan died or disappeared, he took with him not just the secrets of his burial, but the accumulated wealth of the largest empire in human history. Think about the scale of what we're discussing. For over 20 years, Mongol armies swept across Asia, conquering cities that had stood for millennia, looting treasures that had been gathered over centuries. Every victory brought gold, silver, precious stones, rare artifacts, and objects of unimaginable value back to the Mongol heartland. Silk from China, spices from Persia, jewels from India, sacred relics from a dozen different civilizations. Maury Kravitz, the American treasure hunter, who spent 4 decades searching for the tomb, put it succinctly: in each of the countries and cities and sovereign states he conquered, Genghis Khan brought back the wealth of that culture on 2-wheeled wagons. Not one thing has been found, not a single bejeweled dagger, not a single necklace. It all went into Mongolia and never exited. This represents one of history's greatest disappearing acts. We're not just talking about the wealth of a single ruler. We're talking about the concentrated riches of dozens of civilizations, all of which vanished without a trace. If even a fraction of these treasures were buried with Genghis Khan, his tomb would represent the greatest archaeological treasure trove ever discovered. It would make the tomb of Tutankhamun look like a pauper's grave. But here's the truly mind-bending part. What if that wealth didn't disappear at all? What if it's still out there, not buried in a tomb, but hidden in plain sight? What if the real treasure isn't waiting to be dug up, but has been circulating through Mongolian society for centuries, passed down through families, traded in markets, melted down and reformed into new objects? This possibility suggests that the search for Genghis Khan's tomb has been missing the point entirely. Instead of looking for a single burial site containing vast treasures, perhaps researchers should be looking for the economic impact of those treasures on Mongolian society. Patterns of wealth distribution, family heirlooms that seem too valuable for their supposed origins, objects that appear in museums or private collections without clear provenance. Because if Genghis Khan was truly the master strategist history suggests, he might have understood something that other rulers didn't. Dead treasure buried in a tomb serves no one, but wealth distributed strategically among your people ensures their loyalty for generations. It creates a network of individuals with a vested interest in protecting your secrets. It transforms an entire society into willing guardians of your legacy. Under this theory, every Mongolian family might unknowingly possess a piece of the great Khan's treasure. Every artifact in every collection might be part of a vast distributed inheritance that has kept the secret of his burial safe for 8 centuries. The tomb itself might be empty, or might never have existed at all, because the real treasure was never intended to be concentrated in a single location. This would represent a level of strategic thinking that goes far beyond military conquest. It would be social engineering on a massive scale, designed to ensure that the secret of his disappearance would be protected not by walls or guards, but by an entire culture that had been given a stake in maintaining the mystery. And it would explain why modern Mongolia treats the question of his tomb with such reverence. Because perhaps, at some level, they understand that they are all part of the secret, that their very identity as a people is connected to their role as guardians of something that must never be fully revealed. The implications are staggering. If this theory has any validity, then the search for Genghis Khan's tomb isn't just an archaeological quest. It's a challenge to the cultural identity of an entire nation. It's an attempt to solve a mystery that was never meant to be solved, to find something that was deliberately scattered to the winds. But the mystery doesn't end with treasure, or even with cultural identity. Because there's one more layer to this puzzle that most people never consider. The technological implications of what might be hidden in that tomb, if it exists, could reshape our understanding of medieval science and engineering. The Mongol Empire wasn't just a military force. It was a vast network of cultural and technological exchange. Mongol armies didn't just conquer cities, they captured engineers, scholars, craftsmen, and inventors from across the known world. Chinese siege engineers, Persian mathematicians, Byzantine architects, Indian metalworkers. All of these experts were brought back to the Mongol heartland, where they worked together in ways that had never been possible before. What technologies might have emerged from this unprecedented collaboration? What innovations might have been developed in secret, far from the eyes of enemies who might steal or counter them? And what might have been buried with the Khan, who made it all possible? Ancient sources hint at Mongol military technologies that seemed almost magical to their contemporaries. Siege engines that could breach any wall, weapons that could kill at impossible distances, communication systems that allowed coordination across vast distances with supernatural speed. Were these simply superior versions of existing technologies, or were they something entirely new? If Genghis Khan's tomb contains examples of these lost technologies, its discovery could revolutionize our understanding of medieval science. It might reveal that the technological gap between the 13th century and the modern era was smaller than we imagine. It might prove that certain innovations we credit to later periods were actually developed centuries earlier in the secret workshops of the Mongol Empire. But it might also reveal something even more unsettling. Because if the Mongols possessed advanced technologies that have since been lost, what else might they have known? What other secrets might be waiting in the darkness beneath the Mongolian steppes? The search for Genghis Khan's tomb has become more than just an archaeological quest. It's become a symbol of humanity's relationship with its own past. A reminder that no matter how much we think we know about history, there are still mysteries that defy our understanding, still secrets that refuse to be uncovered, still questions that have no answers. And perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. Perhaps some secrets are meant to stay buried. Perhaps the greatest conqueror in human history understood something that we're only beginning to grasp, that true power isn't about what you reveal to the world, but about what you choose to keep hidden. Because 8 centuries after his death, Genghis Khan still rules over something no other emperor has ever controlled. He rules over our imagination, over our curiosity, over our dreams of discovery and our fear of the unknown. His empire may have crumbled, but his mystery endures. His cities may have fallen, but his secret remains unbroken. And somewhere in the vast silence of the Mongolian steppes, beneath stars that have watched over shepherds and conquerors alike, the question still whispers on the wind. Where does the great Khan sleep? And perhaps more importantly, is he sleeping at all? The modern world has brought new tools to this ancient mystery, but it has also revealed just how deeply the secret has been woven into the fabric of Mongolian society itself. Because, as technology has advanced, as satellite imagery has grown more precise, as ground-penetrating radar has become more sophisticated, something unexpected has emerged. The landscape itself seems to resist revelation. Consider the work of the National Geographic Society's Valley of the Khans project, launched in 2011 with the most advanced non-invasive imaging technology available. LIDAR systems capable of seeing through forest canopy. Magnetometers that can detect buried metal from incredible distances. Ground-penetrating radar that can map underground structures without disturbing a single grain of soil. All of this cutting-edge science brought to bear on a mystery that has confounded humanity for 8 centuries. The results have been both tantalizing and frustrating. The technology works perfectly. The equipment functions exactly as designed. The data streams back in pristine digital clarity. But when researchers analyze what they've found, they encounter the same maddening pattern that has plagued every previous expedition. Anomalies that disappear upon closer inspection. Promising signatures that turn out to be natural rock formations. Underground chambers that prove to be empty caves carved by ancient rivers. So here we stand, 8 centuries after the great Khan vanished into legend, no closer to solving the riddle than the first treasure hunter who set foot on Mongolian soil. Every expedition has failed. Every technology has come up empty. Every theory has crumbled like dust in the steppe winds. And perhaps that's the most profound truth of all. Maybe Genghis Khan's greatest conquest wasn't the cities he captured or the armies he defeated. Maybe it was time itself. Because in a world where every secret eventually comes to light, where every mystery eventually finds its solution, he alone has managed to stay hidden. His tomb remains the one treasure that refuses to be found, the one story that refuses to be told, the one secret that refuses to surrender to human curiosity. And as the stars wheel overhead, and the wind continues to whisper across the endless grasslands of Mongolia, somewhere in the darkness, the great Khan sleeps on.